Hello everyone! Welcome to the MudRoom, our weekly free and live Uncommon Sense parenting class. How is everybody today? First off, before we do anything else, let me say that I am terribly sorry about last week's MudRoom. Technology was not on our side that night. In fact, I'm just going to make sure. Yes, okay. I was just making sure that my sound was on tonight. For some reason, the computers just weren't playing nice that night. The recording didn't record the audio, otherwise we would just repost it, and it just generally wasn't working out for us that night. So I promise that I will have Eva back soon for sure, once we figure out the tech, because I know a lot of you were really looking forward to discussing sleep. The computer's just, I'm like a walking EMP, okay guys? The fact that I have a successful online business is actually somewhat of a miracle. If something can break, you can almost guarantee that it will break simply because I am around. So I'm going to try and figure it out so that we don't have that problem again. Okay, moving on. If you're new around here, welcome. My name is Allana Robinson, and I'm a parenting effectiveness coach. I help toddlers, or parents of toddlers. I do help toddlers indirectly. I help parents of toddlers, preschoolers, and kindergartners understand why their children are misbehaving and how to fix it without yelling, shaming, or using timeouts. I'm the host of the Parenting Posse, which is my free peer support Facebook group. I also host my wildly supportive program for parents struggling with their young kids' challenging behaviors, Parentability, and obviously I'm your host here on the MudRoom. If you're watching, please say hi and let me know that you're here. If you're watching the replay, drop me a replay in the comments, and if you're shy, just do me a favor and give this video a like. Ask questions and drop comments as we go along. I love chatting with you guys, and our topic tonight is usually a fairly hot one. So tonight we're going back to basics. We haven't discussed extinction bursts in a really long time, and a lot of newer posse members are missing some of our more foundational concepts that make uncommon sense parenting in general make sense, and they make parenting just that much easier just on their own. And one of those that's been coming up a lot lately is that when you implement my strategies, it usually gets worse at first. And I 100% expect this, okay? I can practically guarantee you that when you start implementing uncommon sense parenting strategies, you will find that it gets worse before it gets better. But the good news is that one, this is expected, and two, it's got a name. It's an actual thing. It's called an extinction burst. So extinction bursts happen when we change how we respond to our child, or we enforce a new boundary. We've talked a lot about how children love predictability. They love consistency. It makes them feel safe. If I do A, mom will do B. That's reliable for them. So when we change that, it causes them to consume a lot of energy. Suddenly, they have to navigate this change. So this exchange goes from a pretty low energy consumer to a big one in an instant. They have to adjust. And children are very scientific. They have a hypothesis and then they test it. And if that hypothesis turns out to be true, they begin to test variables of it. Under what circumstances does this remain true? So what you've just gone and done by changing your parenting technique or setting a new boundary is screw with their proven hypothesis. They have data to prove that you will eventually do what you have always done. So how they try to get back to the status quo is by escalating, right? You aren't going to yell at me and throw me in timeout for hitting my brother. I'll hit you. I'll punch you. I'll scream and punch you. I'll scream, punch, and kick you. I'll use both fists. I'll turn back on my brother. I'll headbutt the wall. They're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until the behavior becomes unsustainable, and then it's just going to stop. Just like a balloon. It gets too big and it bursts. And then it's generally over, because just like a balloon, it's in tatters. It's been disproven. They can't use it anymore. And however, I want you to keep in mind that if you go back to the status quo while you're already in a burst, like while they've already got a big balloon, that's your new baseline, right? Just like a balloon, if you stretch it out and let all the air out, it's a lot easier to get it to that size again. Same thing with behavior. They will always start at that behavior, at that escalated level from then on. Something else to note is that if your child is having burst after burst after burst for this same behavior, they keep doing something that isn't working for them, and you're certain that you're being 100% consistent in your new approach, that's a big old red flag that you have a skill deficit there. The reason they aren't adjusting is because the new thing that you're teaching them to do by using the logical consequence process requires them to use a weak skill, so they can't adjust. They don't know how to do what you're asking them to do, even though they likely know what to do, which is good information, as annoying as it is. That means we've hit pay dirt. It's like a big sign going, there's a problem here, dig here. I was teaching an in-person workshop last week, and a mom approached me with that exact scenario where her son was having burst after burst after burst, and she was like, I'm doing 99% of what you have taught tonight. I've got some ideas on what I can improve, but I'm really not that far off. But he has those bursts every day about the same things, and I have no idea what to do about it. And I was like, okay, well, that tells us that he's got a weak area of executive function that we need to dig into. Guys, the relief on her face, you know that look that someone gets when they've been kind of holding their breath and they just let it all out? That is exactly how she looked. And she said, I can't tell you how refreshing it is to have someone say something other than just be stricter. And I think that's a sentiment that a lot of my newer clients would echo too. When a child's having burst after burst after burst, the implication a lot of people, especially doctors in my experience, will make is that you're just not being as consistent as you claim. You're not being consistent enough. You're not being strict enough. You just need to be stricter. Your child's behavior is somehow you're failing. And that's not the case at all. Kids do well if they can. If they can't, we need to look at what's holding them back. It's got nothing to do with being a hard ass. So some things to keep in mind when it comes to extinction bursts. The longer your child has had this expectation, the more data they've got, the bigger the burst is going to be. If you've been putting them in timeouts and nagging them and shaming them and etc. their whole life, and suddenly you switch to natural and logical consequences and you start collaborating with them and skill building with them, whoa, like that is a big change. And I've got 2 to 3 years worth of data to say that you're going to do the other thing. That burst is likely going to tear the roof off of your house, so just be aware, hunker down, okay? Whereas, if you've been using a sticker chart for a week and then you switch to natural and logical consequences and collaboration and skill building, you might barely notice it. Another thing is that in the moment, while you're writing it out, you need to be ignoring the behavior, but not your child, okay? So if they're escalating by trying to, grab Grandma Myrtle's war era crystal vase and chuck it, you're not just going to ignore them and let them tear the house apart, okay? You're ignoring the behavior, not the child. Take the vase away, stay calm, move them to a safe space. If it's not hurting people or property though, it's fine. Let them get it out. They're low on energy, they don't know what to do, and they're scared. Treat them that way. For a young kid, changing something that they've relied on their entire life is terrifying. So give them that compassion. This is scary. I'm here. I'm going to support you through this, but I'm not going to let you hurt people or property. Hey, Lauren. Hey, Ashley. Yay, I'm glad you got the reminder. We were having some tech issues with that a couple weeks ago, too. I love computers and I hate computers. Lauren says, is there a certain age when extinction bursts begin? From the very beginning, right? Like, for 15, a lot of people will say, like, my 15-month-old has started having tantrum. It's not necessarily that the 15-month-old is having what we would typically call a tantrum. It's that they're having an extinction burst against a new boundary, against a new way of being. I find extinction bursts tend to escalate or tend to become more frequent after a child has gone through a developmental leap, even if nothing else has changed. So often I'll have clients come to me and they'll be like, okay, so nothing's changed on my end. Like, we've been doing the same thing we've been doing for the last year, and suddenly we're having tons of extinction bursts over, things we're being very consistent about. And generally that means that your child has gone through a developmental leap, usually a cognitive leap, because when that happens, they understand a lot of things that they didn't literally the day before. So they go to bed, they wake up, and suddenly there's all these new possibilities that they hadn't thought of before because they've had a developmental leap. So now they have to test all these different possibilities, and you're like, no, this is still how we deal with this. And that can just take a little bit of time for them to kind of go through those hypotheses. Does that make sense? Have you weathered an extinction burst recently? Have you maybe gone back to the status quo because of an extinction burst recently? Tell me, I'd love to hear from you. I know that these can make you feel like you're doing it wrong, but if anything, they mean that you're doing it right. So just hang on to that and, use whatever coping method of choice you need to get through it. This is where a lot of parentability members say that they really appreciate the support in our inner circle group. Say that 10 times fast. Because there's always someone around to support you and give you a bit of a pep talk when you're going through something like this. And because it's a peer, it's another parent who isn't just another rando on the internet. It's someone who is following the same guiding principles that you are. It's a lot easier to accept their reassurance, brainstorm your next move together, or if all else fails, tag me and I'll jump in and reinforce whatever it is that you need reinforced, or, explain whatever you need explained, or just, pass you the virtual glass of wine. Extinction bursts are not fun, but they are very, very much so worth it. Hey, Jenny! Jenny says, is it okay to walk away during an extinction burst or tell them to scream and cry in their room instead? Yes, but you just want to make sure that you're not shaming them, right? So if they're having an extinction burst and the safest place for them, because they're getting physical, is their room, because that's already, kid-proofed and safe, that's fine, but context is everything, right? So it's not go to your room and come out when, I'm not going to let you out until you have calmed down. It's, okay, so you're not safe here, so let's go to your room where it's safe for you to calm down, right? Walking away is generally my preference, because usually if a child's in an extinction burst, they're in brown brain, they're very escalated, and they don't feel safe. So moving their body, taking control of their body and physically moving them will often be seen as a personal attack, quite rightly, and that will usually just kind of add fuel to the fire. So my personal preference and what I prefer that my clients do is to say, okay, I don't feel safe around you right now, so I'm going to go calm down downstairs, outside, in my office, wherever it is that you're going. Let me know when you're ready to talk, or let me know when you want me to come back. If it's possible, I find the best way to de-escalate an extinction burst is literally just to sit as close to the child as you feel safe sitting. That doesn't mean you have to be like in their grill. Usually for me, that's about 2 to 3 meters away. And I usually just sit there with my hands up, like palm up on my knees, and just kind of wait expectantly. I'm still engaged. I'm still there. I'm still waiting for them visibly. Usually while I'm doing that, I'm focusing very much on deep breathing so that I stay calm. And that way I'm engaged. I'm there. I'm making sure that they're physically safe, but I'm not engaging in the behavior. I'm not dealing with them. I'm letting that storm pass. And then generally what happens is that the child eventually has their burst, starts to come off of it, starts to freak out a little bit, and then they need, physical comfort. And I'm right there with open arms, literally waiting for them. So that's how I prefer to do it. Okay. Thanks so much for being with me tonight. I will see you next week for another Uncommon Sense parenting class. Bye.